It's pronounced Tepui. Tepui. I see a lot of videos on the internet of people singing the praise of these tents and not many people criticizing them. And I know people can get a little incensed when somebody has an opinion they don't agree with, or if maybe they've been building up in their mind that they want to purchase one of these, and to see somebody coming in crapping on that idea might get them a little angry. And I already see that in the comments too, where people are like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, you don't have any experience with this, you don't know what's going on. So what experience do I have? Well, I've owned this tent for 5 years. I go camping a lot, about 2 times a month, except December and January it gets a little too cold. My camping experience goes back to my parents carrying me on one of those toddler backpacks. I've been camping in the mountains and in the desert since I was pretty much long before I can remember. And my off-road experience, nowadays I like to do easier 100-mile treks cross-country rather than a 10-mile trip that takes all day. But I used to go four-wheeling in Moab, doing trails like Hell's Revenge, Metal Masher, Behind the Rocks, Golden Spikes, so I've got a little bit of off-road experience. The first time I ever even seen a rooftop tent was in 2001 at an off-road gathering in Uray, Colorado. And at the time, I thought that was crazy. Why would anybody want a tent like that? And then in early 2016, I thought it was a good idea and I bought one myself. And now I think it's crazy. Why would anybody get that? Except I've got half a decade of experience to explain why. Now, the one good thing that can be said about rooftop tents is they are the ultimate in street cred for being outdoorsy. Everybody sees one of those and thinks it's just the coolest thing. And I have people coming up and talking to me everywhere I go about it. Not just in like campgrounds and visitor center parking lots. I'm talking like at the gas station or at the grocery store in the city. People will stop me in the parking lot and ask me, oh, hey, I've been thinking about getting one of those rooftop tents. What do you think about it? They're looking for somebody to sing its praises because they're trying to justify buying one themselves, and so they're always a little crestfallen when I tell them I don't think it's a good idea and I wouldn't recommend getting one. Especially the time when this guy was asking that with his wife standing next to him, and I told him I don't like it and I'm getting rid of mine and you really shouldn't get one. And she gave him the ultimate I told you so face. I feel so sorry. I'm sorry, guy. I did not mean to put you in that situation, but it's the truth, and I guess she's right. It's not worth the money. So instead of constantly explaining to people in parking lots when I just want to go in and get some groceries, I thought I'd make a video of why I don't think you should get this tent. Now, there's a laundry list of issues I've had with this tent, not even counting the damage that it's occurred in about 5 years, which honestly for a $2,000 tent is excessive. It should not break down that quickly. But as for the actual issues I have, pretty much all of them, I knew about these issues before I purchased it. They're not new items. If you're watching this video thinking of buying a tent yourself, you're probably going to listen to me rattle off these problems I have with it thinking, oh yeah, I already knew about that. And just like me, you'll think, oh, it's not a big idea. I can get past that. I'll just change my behavior a little bit. The thing is, it's a lot of things. There's a lot of little issues that by themselves don't sound that bad, but when they pile up, it's like bleeding to death from 1,000 paper cuts. It really becomes a burden. So before I get into the list, let's go over one of the big things that everybody glosses over and justifies, and that's the fact that it's expensive. And I don't mean a little expensive, it's really expensive. This is basically the entry model tent you can get. It costs about $1,700 online right now. And it's on a rack that costs about $700 or $800. So altogether, you're looking at about $2,500 for a tent. But let's get into the issues. The main thing I don't like is that you can't drive with it set up. Which, okay, yeah, that's so obvious. Of course you can't do that. It would be stupid to think that you can drive with one of these set up. But you don't realize how much that's going to impact your vacation and how you plan things. Basically, once your tent is set up, I hope you don't want to do anything that's further than 100 feet away from your camp. Everything has to be within walking distance. Once you're set up, look around you because that's all you're going to see. This is fine. At the end of the day, eventually you do just want to settle into camp. You don't want to do anything. But think of your whole vacation. How often do you just want to be restricted to your camp? To put things in perspective, let's say that you've got a nice campground in Yellowstone. You get there, you set everything up, everything's ideal, you're excited about the whole vacation ahead of you. You spend the evening getting settled in, it's great, you have your fire, you go to bed. Then in the morning you want to wake up and you want to go see Old Faithful erupt as the sun rises. Well, you can't do that anymore. At least not with this setup, which means you got to wake up early, put that down in the dark, and then go drive somewhere. And then you go on your hikes or whatever. Then noon comes around, you've been up since 6 o'clock, you want to take a little afternoon siesta, you head back to camp, but you can't go to sleep, you got to set the tent up again if you want to lay down. Let's say the evening comes around, you want to go to the lodge and eat at the restaurant there in a cool old historic building. You get done, you just want to go back to camp, flop down in your sleeping bag and go to bed because you're going to be starting early again the next day. Well, you can't do that. You need to set up the tent again because you've been driving. So it's just a constant setup and tear down that really starts to impact your whole vacation. This hits me particularly hard because I like to do photography on my trips, and your key points to take pictures are sunrise and sunset. And so I like to be taking sunrise pictures. You have to be there before the sun comes up about 30 minutes. So I have to drive to whatever location I want to be at. Plus I got to tear down the tent. Basically means I'm tearing down the tent when it's still pitch black outside and it's cold. And then in the evening, I take pictures of sunset until about 30 minutes after the sun goes down. Then I drive up 15 minutes back to camp. By then it's pitch dark. I'm setting up the tent in the dark again. I set up and tear down that tent almost always in the dark. Always either freezing in the morning or at night when I just want to go to bed. Which brings us to the first perceived benefit of one of these tents is that, it's quick and easy to set up and tear down, right? The problem is, it's not really a whole lot better than just a regular ground tent. Setting up a backpacking tent on the ground really doesn't take that much time. Setting up the tent's quick. The part that takes a long time is getting all your bedding and materials set up the way you want so you can sleep, and then setting up camp and getting it all arranged. Getting the actual equipment on the ground and where you want it, that's actually pretty quick. I get a little aggravated watching reviews on YouTube where somebody's had a tent for 2 weeks and they brag about how quick it is to set up, and they show them unfolding it and go, "There, I'm done. I bet you can't do a ground tent that quickly." But they don't show all the steps. They don't show how long it takes to get all those poles in and get the flies up. They don't show how much of a pain it is to get that vinyl cover off the top and how filthy it is. Seriously, where does all this come from? A coal mine? A ground tent is literally in the dirt and it's cleaner. And they never show the time that it takes to level the vehicle. That's right, you have to level the entire vehicle. A set of leveling blocks and a bubble level should be included in every rooftop purchase because they are an absolute necessity. And while it only takes a few seconds to find a level spot for a tent, shift the tent around a little bit, it's much harder to zigzag a vehicle around trying to get it on level ground. In many cases, there might be trees in the way, or the cleared area for the vehicle might not be big enough to maneuver. And I'm a big stickler for the tread lightly motto of staying on trail at all times. If the cleared area for the vehicle is tilted and lumpy, but there's a nice clear area nearby that's covered in vegetation and microbial soil, never in a million years should you drive over that soil. You need to set up in the cleared area for the vehicle. The whole rule with campgrounds that are dispersed sites is not to expand the impact. So never ever create any more impact than was already there. This brings up the added issue of finding campsites where you can even park a vehicle that has any level spot whatsoever. You lose a lot of flexibility on where you can camp because you have to sleep where you park. A perfect example of this was a site I camped at Christmas Meadows in the Uintas. There was a dirt road and there was a nice perfect little pull out just alongside that I could park the truck, but the tent would fold out into the road. And I don't trust people passing me not to clip the edge of the tent. And even if I could trust them, I don't want to be sleeping in an area where my head is just a few feet from passing traffic. Meanwhile, if you walked 30 feet down a hill from that spot, there was a perfect shaded glen that was flat, had room for tent, kitchen setup, everything. And even a little further past that was a nice stream running by that you could get fish out of. And that whole idyllic campground would have been passed by me, except that I always have to bring my backpacking tent anyway, because I might come to a camp spot where I can't use the tent, or I might want to wake up so early that I don't want to set up the tent and take it back down every day. And while rooftop tents work pretty well in dispersed camping situations, they're horrible for organized campgrounds. Every year my extended family goes camping at Bear Lake. We get a nice group site that has a big parking area, and then you just walk your camp gear back into the trees where it's nice and shaded. But it's literally just a parking lot, which means if I park in there and I set up the tent, I have to take up one parking slot plus the one next to it, because the tent folds over to the side, which means now there's not enough parking spots for the whole family, and Cousin Oliver can't come up with his new family he's got. And even those individual campgrounds, like you get in national forests, are a pain in the butt too. They have that nice paved loop, you get a nice little paved parking spot for your car, and there's this nice area beyond that for your campground. But not with this tent. You have to camp in your parking spot. Fold it out, which usually there's enough room to fold to the side, but you're literally sleeping right next to the loop where everybody's driving past all the time. Now those are kind of my main issues, but there's still a laundry list of other things, so let's go over these a little quicker. These tents are so noisy in the wind you can't even imagine. That little rainfly cover just flaps and flaps in the lightest breeze. Even though it's got straps to tighten down, those don't stop it from slapping against the tent. Because they're high up, they also catch more wind than you would if you were sleeping on the ground. This was an issue when I was going along the White Rim Trail in Canyonlands with my dad. We were at the White Crack campground, and the wind coming up over the rim caught the underside of the latter part of the tent and started to fold it in on us. There was enough weight that all it really did was smack us up really hard in the middle of the night, but you don't want that when you're trying to sleep. Which is where in the middle of the night and strongly blowing winds, I was able to come up with this little hold down for the tent so it doesn't make it feel like somebody's kicking you in the head while you're trying to sleep. That night at the White Crack was terrible because there were desert mice crawling all over everything, and they can get up onto vehicles. Even you think that you're okay with them getting through the wheel wells and everything, but they'll climb up all over your vehicle, get in any food that's not secured. And so all night while I was laying in the tent, I could hear the mice crawling underneath us going through the camp gear, and then they came up the sides and were crawling on the tent outside of us. And I remember seeing the shadows of them crawling on the mesh next to me and smacking them to try to discourage them, and hearing the mouse bounce off the roof of the truck. And why do I bring this up? Well, there's little holes in the tent that mice can get through. And my dad said I was just imagining it, but I swear to God, one of the mice came in and I felt something touch my toe, and as soon as I started freaking out and thrashing around, obviously I think he made a run for it, and I wasn't able to find anything in there, but I'm pretty sure I had a mouse touch me because there are openings large enough for the mice to get into, and they were already all over the tent. Regardless, you think that this gets you away from the animals, and you're thinking lions and tigers and bears, but you're not going to see lions and tigers and bears in the mountains. What you definitely will see are mice, ground squirrels, all kinds of things that can still get on the tent. So this tent is big and heavy, and it will impact your gas mileage, which is already bad when you're getting 16 miles to the gallon, but then you start getting 15 miles a gallon. It doesn't seem like a lot, but that's a decent percentage for me to be a little irritated with it. And I know what you're thinking. You think, oh, well, I'll just take the tent off when I'm not using it, but it weighs about 120 pounds on its own. Even with two people, it's awkward to deal with, and eventually you'll just start leaving it up there. A much bigger issue with the weight is the capacity for what your roof can handle. This has become a very controversial issue in the last year among the overlanding community. Somebody emailed Toyota what weight their roof was rated at, and Toyota replied 120 pounds. And that's pretty common from what other people are finding out from other manufacturers for their roof capacities. And that's not the rating of the little luggage rack, that's the rating of the roof itself. If you think that this doesn't sound right, then go stand in the middle of your roof and jump up and down once and see if it leaves a dent. Obviously, where the rack mounts is going to make a big difference, but the manufacturer is only warranting a certain amount, and that means insurance might only cover that amount as well. And 120 pounds is the weight of the entire rooftop tent itself. That's not counting the people inside, which I'll be very generous to myself. Let's average that at about 200 pounds per person. So with 2 people in there, being a 2-man tent, plus the actual tent itself, you're looking at about 520 pounds of weight on your roof. The little thin luggage rack that came with your vehicle is not going to cut it. And even most of the aftermarket roof racks that you buy, they're not made to hold that kind of weight. They're made to hold a couple of skis or snowboards or some plastic kayaks. So you're going to need a really sturdy roof rack to go with that tent. And when the wind catches that giant square on your roof, or if you're off-road or that constant shaking is affecting it, it could cause damage. A lot of roof racks are only held on with pop rivets, and those can be easily torn out. They're not going through with bar stock underneath with bolts and washers. So what does this mean? It means honestly you could probably put it on there and you'll get by, but if anything happens and any damage is caused during an accident or a rollover, or if the wind just catches it and tears out the pop rivets, the fact that you've gone over what the vehicle manufacturer is warranting means you're probably not going to get an insurance claim out of it either. And honestly, there's just the danger of what if it rips off while you're on the freeway and lands on the car behind you. You really need to know that it's on there tight, and that's 120 pounds on the roof is a heck of a lot of weight. Also, the technical off-roader in me knows it's a bad idea to have that much weight up high when you're going off-road. It raises the center of gravity of your entire vehicle, making you top-heavy and prone to a rollover. Even on my truck, with the tent mostly below the roof line, it's still really high for a tent. I'm 6'3", and it's awkward to set up and take this down without crawling up onto the bed. And if you're not as limber as you used to be back in your 20s, you might not want to be crawling all over, manhandling this big heavy weight up there, especially if it's been raining and the rails are all slippery and wet. Now, even though they make a big deal about the fact that you can leave a lot of your bedding in there and still close the tent, not all bedding can be kept in there. In my experience, only your sleeping bag, pillow, and a blanket can. Oddly enough, your air mattresses, they have to be deflated for one thing, and reinflating an air mattress takes more time than anything else. But the Thermarest self-inflating mattresses, even when they're opened and vented, they don't compress that well, and you still have to take that out and roll it out anyway. So with those drawbacks being a main point of contention for me, like I say, each one on its own is a small annoyance, but together it's just too much, especially for something that's that expensive. For the price of that tent, I can buy 10 good ground tents. However, there are a few silver linings to one of these tents. If you're moving camp every day, it's not so bad because you are going to have to set up and tear down your tent twice a day. You'll have a lot less reason to be mad at the fact that on a 5-day camping trip, you have to set up and tear down camp 8 times because you had a different campsite every time. If you have to do it 8 times on a 5-day trip when you're at one campsite, it gets a little annoying. Now, there are more expensive rooftop tents that take care of some of the issues I have, especially the hard-shelled ones that pop up, but those are usually bigger, heavier, and they are way more expensive. I'm not talking a couple $100s, I'm talking thousands of dollars more expensive. Also, if you have one of these rooftop tents on one of those cool off-roading trailers, that changes the whole dynamic of how the rooftop tent is used. That I could see as being pretty good, where you're able to drop off the tent and leave it at camp while you drive off and do other things. But again, that's a very steep jump in price if you're just looking for a tent. But overall, I just don't recommend rooftop tents. Maybe if you were in Australia and had to worry about crocs on the ground, or if you're in the savannas of Africa. But in the US, they just don't provide that many benefits for the massive list of drawbacks they have. That's why I got this new swag tent that I'm trying out. It has a lot of the same quick setup benefits, but eliminates a lot of the drawbacks. I've only been using it for this one season so far, but already I can tell I would rather have the swag than the rooftop tent, although I still don't know if I would have the swag over a ground tent. I'm still evaluating that. And with having the swag as an option compared to a rooftop tent for that overlanding camping style where you're only staying at a campsite once per day, I honestly can't see any reason for the rooftop tent. If the swag beats that, why would I want to spend $2,500 on that when I can get the swag for $250? Except for that street cred. If you're just worried about looking the part of being the ultimate outdoorsman, a rooftop tent on your truck is the best. Who cares if it isn't logical and it screws up your vacation plans? As long as it looks good in the Instagram pics, that's all that matters, right?